Hey guys, welcome to the first lesson on the fundamentals of Xamarin iOS. In this lesson, we're going to take a look at building your first iOS application using Xamarin. Now, if you don't know what Xamarin is, it's basically a project that allows us to build mobile applications in either iOS or Android. And the cool thing about it is that we can build applications in for these types of devices using C#. So if you watched a lot of my C# videos on the fundamentals of C#, advanced C#, all those different C# videos, all that is going to apply in building iOS applications. Now, let's just get a few things out of the way. To build iOS applications using C#, we still need to have a Mac computer. Now, I'm personally going to be building most of these applications using Visual Studio, and there's a whole packaging and pricing thing on Xamarin's website that explains whatever you want to pay and what you can do. So I think you need the business version for Xamarin for Visual Studio, but you don't have to get this one. You can also use Xamarin Studio, which can be ran on the Mac, and it basically it's very similar to Visual Studio, but that allows you to build iOS applications using C# on the Mac computer. I'm going to be building iOS applications using Visual Studio on a Windows computer. And you may be wondering, well, if I need a Mac computer, how am I going to do this? Well, basically, Xamarin has this program that you can run on a Mac computer called Xamarin iOS build host. And by running that build host, it allows me to connect to the Mac computer on my Windows computer. And when I write my code, it basically allows me to compile on the Mac side of the computer. It sends the code, compiles it over there, and basically sends it back. So overall, you still need a Mac computer if you want to build an iOS application using Xamarin. I'm going to use Visual Studio, but you don't have to. You can use Xamarin Studio, which is ran right on the Mac computer. Now, in this video, I'm going to do the programming in Visual Studio on the Windows, and then at the end, I'm going to then switch to the Mac computer and show you the program running on a simulator on the Mac computer. So yeah, simulators run on the Mac computer. And the cool thing about Xamarin is when you write your program, you can debug remotely to your Mac computer. So your program can be running on your Mac in the simulator, and your Visual Studio on the Windows side can be debugging it, so you can see, if it crashes, you can see what happened and get exceptions. You can put breakpoints in and all those cool things like that. So if you're using Visual Studio, you can follow me directly in creating a project and setting it up. But if you're using Xamarin Studio, it's very similar. You're going to do the same thing. We're going to go to File, New Project, and things like that. So let's go ahead and create a new project. So we can hit New Project or go File, New Project. Inside of the New Project dialog, we're going to do a classic iPhone application, and we're going to do a single view application, meaning it's just one page. You can think of that for now. It's just one page, and I'm going to call it Lesson 1, and then hit OK. Now, if this is your first time creating a project, it's going to ask you to set up and connect to your Mac. As you can see, mine is already set up and connected, and it says connected to iOS build host at this IP. So if it's the first time, it's going to ask you to set that up now. Now, in our Solution Explorer, we see a couple things. I'm just going to go over briefly some of them. The main storyboard, this is where we're going to actually have the graphical interface of our views or our view controllers, which I'll go over soon. And we can add buttons and things like that to the application graphically in there. This Lesson 1 view controller, this is the code behind for our first view. And you can see it built in some methods for us already. We have view did load, view will appear, and we're going to go over these shortly. So this is basically the code behind for our first view. Let me go ahead and make some room. We also see a app delegate .cs, And this is where we're going to handle, we're not going to do any of this in this specific video, but this is where we're going to handle system-wide events, essentially. So for example, you can see some that are here right now did enter background. So if the application went to the background, it gives you some explanation of why you should use this. We'll terminate and we'll enter foreground. So here's some events that we can use in app delegate. And we also have info.plist, and this is where we can set some settings of our application, all our naming stuff here, device orientation that we support, style, tinting, etc. We'll probably look at most of this in videos down the road. So let's go ahead and close that. Let's go ahead and go into our main storyboard. So as you can see in the main storyboard, we are giving our first view controller. Now anything that has a black bar on the bottom like this is our view controller, or a view controller. And it works the same way if you're familiar with building any type of application in Visual Studio using C#, where you can click on things and you have a properties window on the right hand side where you can change things about that. You can change the properties and things like that. Now this arrow over here, this is called a segue, and this is the entry segue, and we'll talk about segues in the future. And then in the left hand side we have our toolbox. This is where we can add more view controllers, controls, and we're going to be using some of these controls and some of these other things that we can drag and drop onto our storyboard to add functionality to our application. Now, in this lesson, like I said before, I just want to quickly go over and show you the basics of getting a running application. We're going to build a simple calculator that just takes two numbers, adds them together, and prints it onto the screen. That's all I want to cover in this first video to keep it simple so no one gets too confused. So, in our toolbox, let's just start with dragging on some controls. So I know I want two text fields. This is going to be for each number that I have. So I'm going to put the text field on. I can just drag and drop, and I'm just going to drag it to like that. So this is our first text field. I'm going to add another text field and make the sizes match up. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some of the properties that we have. So let's go for the first one. So this right here allows us to change the text. In this case, I'm going to delete text and leave it blank. And I'm going to instead add a placeholder. You can see the placeholder text. I can put placeholder text here. So I'm just going to say number 1. So just so that this is where number 1 is going to be. If you look through some of the other properties, you can change font, border, you can change what kind of keyboard you want to use, spell checking if that's enabled. And there's all a bunch of things that you can use here, and the layout page is how it's laid out on the screen. You can change all that stuff. What I want to do is I want to set a name for this text box, because if you recall from building like a C# form application or a WPF application, there's the text of something and then there's always the name of something. By setting the name of something, that allows us to access that control in the code behind files, so that we can write some C# code to interact with this control. So I'm going to call this control number 1 text box. So now this has the name of number 1 text box. I'm going to do the same thing for this. I'm going to delete the text and put a placeholder saying number 2, and I'm going to make the name of this number 2 text box. So those are my two text boxes that users are going to enter numbers in to add them together. I'm going to add a button underneath this. This button is going to be our add button. You're going to click this and it will add the numbers together. So I'm going to make this, I'm going to call it the add button. And then I'm going to change the text of it. I'm going to change the text of it to add. As you can see, it all updates live. So now it says add in our button. The last thing I need for this is just a label I'm going to put down here. This label is going to display our answer to the two numbers added together. So I'm going to say answer label, and then I want to make its text blank as of now also. So now that we gave all our controls names, we can use them in our code behind in our view controller. Now, if you've experienced with Visual Studio building forms or WPF applications, you know that to get to the event, so let's say when the button is clicked, add button is clicked, basically an event is fired. If you don't know what events are, you need to go back to some basic or my fundamental programming videos to learn what an event is. But basically, it's just a thing that happens. So when I click the button, it fires an event. Now, anyone who's listening to that event gets notified about it. So I click add, and this add clicked event gets fired. Now, whoever's listening to it, let's say I'm listening to it, I'll get notified when it is clicked. So now it's clicked. Now I can do something about it. So that's what an event is. And I have a video on events. I think it's in my advanced C# section if you want to go ahead and watch that. Now, there are a couple ways of setting up and hooking up our event handler to that's what's listening to the event. If you're used to Visual Studio and building applications, you know that you can just double click on add, and that will launch the most used event for that, which is clicked. And you can go to events over here, and you can see that we don't have a clicked in iOS, but instead it's touch up inside. That's what you're going to use for basically a click. So if I just double click on add, if I double click on add, you can see it automatically created this event handler called add button touch up inside. And if I write code inside of this method, this is what's going to happen. This code is going to execute when the button is clicked. So that is one way that we can set up the event handler for our add button. There's also another way that we can do it that's more code-based, that we can just hook up the event. So if we go into the view controller, this is the second way. I'm just going to show you that both ways work. If we go into the view controller, there's a function called view_did_load, and this is the function that, the function that's going to get executed when the view finished loading. So in here, we can hook up the event handler if we didn't do it this way. So this is just like normal C# syntax working with events. We have add button. That's the name of our button. We can say add button dot touch up inside plus equal, and then we can hit tab twice, and that will go ahead and generate the event handler. So this is, as you can see, we got the same event essentially. And we just hooked this up so that we basically hooked up touch up inside with this add button touch up inside right here. So that is another way that you can set up the event handler if you don't want to double click on it inside of the graphical editor. So we're going to delete that for now because we already have the add button set up here. So just remember, I double clicked on add, and that automatically generated the event handler for if the button is clicked. By double clicking, that's just going to load the most commonly used event. So now that I have my button, now we have to go ahead and write the code that will allow us to get the numbers that were entered into each text box, and then add them together and then display them into our label, that's our answer label. So to do that, I'm just going to create a bunch of variables to hold our data so it's clear that to you, so you can see what's going on easily. So I'm going to say int number 1. So it's going to be equal to our number 1. Now, if I just type int number 1 equals what's our text box called? It's called number 1 text box. Number 1 text box has a property, as you remember, called text. So that's how we're going to get whatever is typed in, and then semicolon. If I just do that, we're going to run into a problem. And the problem is that number 1 textbox.text is of type string. The text property is a string. And this is saying, oh, I can't store a string into an integer number. This is basic. So what I have to do is I have to convert this string to a number, to an integer. So to do that, I'm going to use the parse function. So I'm going to say int.parse and then pass in the string to the function call. So that's going to convert the string, whatever's typed into that text box, into a number and then store it into number one variable. We're going to do the same thing for number 2, except we're going to use number 2 text box.text. This is very similar to building a WPF application or a Windows Form application. How Xamarin has it set up. This is very simple. They did a really good job. So we have our 2 numbers. Now I'm going to create an answer saying int answer equals number 1 plus number 2. So this is just adding our 2 numbers together and storing them into answer. Now that I have it stored into answer, now I just have to display the answer into the label. So we have a label called answer label. So I'm going to say answer label.text equals answer.toString. Now I could add some contextual text as well. I can say maybe the answer is colon and then attach that using concatenation. This is a standard C# syntax right here. So the first time I run the program, I want to just display the answer into the label. I'll show you what it looks like in the simulator. The second time, I want to just add maybe a pop-up dialog. So you can see that we can use other things. A pop-up dialog is very common in iOS. And now we'll just launch a standard pop-up and we'll display the answer in there as well. So what I'm going to do is to launch the simulator on the Mac. Basically, I want to go up to here with the debug little toolbar area. I want to make it iPhone simulator. Once I make an iPhone simulator on this one, I can target what iOS device I want to use. So in this case, I'm just going to do the iPhone 5S. You could do the 6, the 6 Plus, the 4, and the 5. But as you'll note, if you do the 6 and 6 Plus, you're going to run into some issues as of now where the picture, the application could look a little blurry. And we'll talk about that in later videos about what's going on with the new, because the iPhone 6 and 6 at the time of making this video are new devices. So there's some problems with that we'll have to look at. But if I just do the 5S, we should be fine with that. And then then you just debug the program like a normal C# application. I can hit the start button, and basically it's going to be connecting to the build host, my Mac computer, and sending the information over there, compiling it, and then launching it on the simulator running on that Mac. And the cool thing, like I said before, is that I can actually debug the application on my Windows computer in Visual Studio, even though it's connecting on the Mac. So it's still booting up right now and launching. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the Mac computer and show you what it looks like on the simulator. Okay, so I'm now over on my Mac computer. And before I go over and look at the simulator and run the code to make sure it's working, I want to just take a look at, this is the Xamarin iOS build host. So this is what I was talking about. If you're running on Visual Studio on the Windows computer, you need to run this build host. And basically my Windows computer is connecting to this, and this allows me to actually write the iOS application on my Windows computer. Now when I hit debug, it automatically opened up this simulator and started running the program, which is really cool. So as you can see, the program is running here on the iPhone 5S. And you can see my text fields, my add button are all here. So let's go ahead and make sure the program works. So I'm going to type in a number for number 1, like 15, and I'm going to type in a number for number 2, let's say 30. Now, when I go ahead and hit this add button, it's going to make the label show the answer of these 2 numbers added together, because that's what the code that's the code that we wrote in our add button touch up inside event handler. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the add button. And as you can see, it says the answer is 45. So remember, we use concatenation to display the answer is in front of the answer. So it says the answer is 45. So the application is working well on the simulator. We don't seem to have any problems. So this is just demonstrating how easy it is to get Xamarin up and running and debugging the application on the Windows computer. So Now what I want to do is I basically want to go back to the Windows computer. I just want to change up the program a little bit and just make it display the answer also in a pop-up little dialog so that you can see how to do that. So let's go ahead and switch back to that computer. Okay, so now I'm back over on my Windows computer and I'm back inside the Add button, touch up inside Event Handler. So now I still want to keep it displaying the answer to the label, but I just want to finish up this video, quickly show you how I can make an alert pop up, a little pop-up window, and that will show us the answer in there instead. So to do this, we're going to use a UI alert view. So I'm going to create a UI alert view. I'm going to call it pop-up. I'm going to say equals new UI alert view. Now, inside of its arguments, it takes in a title. So I'm going to say answer. It takes in the message. So the message, I want to actually just display the same thing here. I could store that into a variable, or I could just use the answer label text, but I'm just going to copy that in. We also need a delegate here, but I'm just going to say null for now. We'll go over that later in the future. We need a cancel button title. I'm going to say our cancel button title is okay. And then other buttons I'm also going to make null for now. So now we just added a pop-up view. We created the pop-up, but now we actually have to show it. So this is our pop-up declaration you can think of. So now I want it to actually pop up, so I'm going to say pop-up dot show, and this will actually make the pop-up pop to the screen. So now we should see the answer in two places. So anytime you want to use a pop-up, we're going to use this pop-up dialog. Now this can be customized where we can add more buttons to the pop-ups and things like that, but this is just an information pop-up, and it's just going to display the answer, and that's it. So let's go ahead and jump back over to the Mac computer and let's see what happens. Let's go ahead and debug it. So we're going to start it up, and now it's sending it over to the Mac computer right now, and it's launching the program on the simulator. So I'm back over to the Mac computer, and now we're just going to be testing the program to see if the pop-up works. So let's go ahead and do the same 15 and 30 here, and when I hit add, we should see two things happen now. Let's go ahead and do that. So as you can see, the pop-up came up. This is with the title right there, where I put answer, that bolded text. That's the title argument of the function. Of the pop-up constructor. This is the text area, so it displays the answer is 45, because I just copied the same text from the answer label. So if I hit OK, you can see that it says the answer here also. So I can change these numbers around. Try some other numbers. Hit add. As you can see, the answer is 112. So now that's the pop-up. So that's how you do the pop-up. Don't forget, I see it happen a lot where they'll create the pop-up, but they don't do pop-up.show or whatever you call it. You have to call the show function to make it actually pop up to the user. So the answer is 112. So that's all for this video. We just took a brief look at creating your first iOS application using Xamarin and C#, which is really cool. C#. We get to write this code using C#. The next video that I'm going to cover is going to be covering most likely opening up or creating an application that has multiple screens you can think of for now. And we'll be able to go back and forth in between the screens, and we'll do some other application that actually utilizes two screens. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.